You will never win another argument again. And if you understand what I'm about to tell you, you'll stop trying to, because you'll realize winning arguments is actually how most people lose power, lose respect, and lose control of their lives. Think about the last time you won an argument. Maybe it was with your partner, your coworker, or that guy online who just had to be corrected. You proved your point. You had the facts. You walked away technically right. But did anything really get better? Did your partner suddenly feel closer to you? Did your coworker become easier to work with? Did your boss quietly put a promotion in your file because you demolished someone in a meeting? Probably not. In fact, if you noticed carefully, the more right you were, the colder the room got. Machiavelli understood something that most people never figure out. The person who wins the argument often loses the war. The goal is not to defeat people in conversation. The goal is to quietly steer outcomes in your favor without triggering resistance, ego, or retaliation. That's the trick. And that's why the most powerful move in any argument is to never enter one in the first place. So, how do you actually do that in real life without becoming a doormat, without letting people walk all over you? How do you never argue and still get what you want? Let's break it down like Machiavelli would. Cold, clear, practical. Not about being nice, not about being aggressive, about being effective. First, we have to redefine what winning even means. Most people treat arguments like a sport. Someone scores points, someone gets humiliated, someone walks away angry. That's entertainment, not strategy. From a Machiavellian perspective, you only win when three things happen. 1. The outcome moves closer to what you want. 2. Your reputation and relationships stay intact or improve. 3. The other person believes they were treated fairly, or even thinks it was their idea. If your win damages one of those three, it's not a win. It's a short-term ego hit that costs you long-term power. So, the first mental shift is this. Your goal is not to win arguments. Your goal is to control direction, to shift situations, to influence decisions. Quietly. Once that clicks, the whole way you talk to people changes. Now, here's Machiavelli's trick in simple terms. Never fight on a battlefield you didn't choose. Most arguments are invitations. Someone tosses a challenge at you. A rude comment, a criticism, a political opinion, a jab in front of others. Your reflex is to defend, to push back, to show you're smart. You're right. You're not to be messed with. That reflex is the trap. The moment you react, they've chosen the topic. They've chosen the tone. They've chosen the emotional state. You are now music playing on their battlefield. So, step 1 to never argue is this. Stop accepting invitations. You do this in 3 ways. By controlling your ego, your tone, and your questions. Let's start with ego, because this is where most people get wrecked. Say you're in a meeting, your colleague says, "I don't think your plan makes sense. We tried something like that 2 years ago and it was a disaster." Instantly your ego flares up. You want to say, "This is nothing like what we did 2 years ago. Did you even read the proposal?" And maybe you're right, but if you go there, what happens? You music and this person are now in a public debate. Everyone's watching. They feel attacked. You feel attacked. Whoever wins, somebody walks out with a grudge. Instead, the Machiavellian move is to diffuse the battlefield itself. You look at them and say, "That's a good point. What went wrong last time from your perspective?" That single sentence does 3 things. You validate them just enough so they don't feel the need to keep attacking. You shift the frame from "I'm defending" to "I'm gathering intel." You buy time to understand what you're really up against. Now the spotlight is off you and on the past. Failure. You're no longer the one being judged. The previous attempt is. You're asking for information. You're curious. You're listening. Do you see how that completely changes the energy? There's no argument. There's analysis. And analysis is easier to control. Machiavelli would say, when someone attacks your idea, don't answer their words, answer their motives. Are they protecting their status, their territory, their insecurity, their version of the story? You can't see that if you're busy trying to sound clever. So, the first real rule of never argue is when you feel your ego wanting to jump in, ask a sincere question instead. Walk me through how you see it. What worries you most about this? Tell me more about why that matters to you. People rarely say no to a chance to explain themselves, and when they're talking, they're not attacking. You're gathering information, and information is power. Now, let's take this outside of work for a second. You're at home. Your partner says, "You never listen to me. You're always on your phone. You don't care about what I'm going through." If you respond with, "That's not true. I do listen. You're overreacting. Congratulations. You're technically allowed to defend yourself, but you just walked into a screaming match. You tried to win the argument, and you just lost the emotional war. Try this instead. You're right. I have been on my phone a lot. What do you feel I'm missing right now? See the difference? You're not graveling. You're not self-destructing. You're doing two powerful things at once. You're acknowledging their emotional reality. You're redirecting the energy into specifics instead of vague accusations. Never argue doesn't mean never disagree, it means never fight on the surface level. You go underneath. Machiavelli writes about appearances again and again. People act based not on reality but on how they feel about reality. So when someone is upset, the worst thing you can do is attack their feelings head-on with logic. You shouldn't feel that way is the fastest way to guarantee they'll feel it twice as strong. So, tactic number 2, agree with the emotion. Redirect the story. I can see why that would frustrate you. It makes sense you'd feel that way if it looks like XYZ. I'd probably be annoyed too in your position. You're not admitting guilt for things you didn't do. You're acknowledging their humanity. Only after that do you introduce facts, context, or alternatives, but softly and often in the form of a story. For example, I get why it feels like I don't care when I'm on my phone. What's actually going on is, my brain struggles to turn off work mode and I use this to numb out. That's not your fault, and it's not fair to you. Let's figure out a better way. No argument, just shared problem, shared solution. Now let's add a more directly Machiavellian layer, rankings and face. Machiavelli understood that people would rather cling to a bad decision than admit they were wrong in front of others. Pride is stronger than logic. If you force someone to choose between the truth and their dignity, they will almost always sacrifice the truth to protect their dignity, and they will quietly sabotage you for putting them in that position. So the third rule, never make people feel smaller when you want them to change their mind. This is where most debates die. We correct, we lecture, we roll our eyes, we hit them with statistics. We basically say, you're stupid and here's why. Even if you dress it up with fancy words, they hear the same thing. You're beneath me. Machiavelli's trick, always offer a face-saving path. Instead of you're wrong, say I see why a lot of people think that. I used to think something similar until I saw this. See the move? You're not putting them below you, you're putting them beside. We were both in Camp A. I just shifted to Camp after seeing something newer at work instead of your approach doesn't make sense. Try your approach solves A and B really well. The only thing I'm worried about is C. What if we did your version, but we also add this small thing to cover C? They get to keep ownership. They get to feel smart. Their idea got upgraded, not destroyed. And because they don't have to defend their ego, they're more open to change. This works even with very difficult people, especially with difficult people. Honestly, imagine someone who always has to be right. You probably have at least one of those in your life. The secret with them is simple. Never try to take right away from them. Redirect what they're right about. I think you're right that this is risky. That's exactly why we should test it small first instead of rolling it out to everyone. That way, if you're right and it fails, we catch it early. You've just aligned your agenda with their identity. They get to stay the cautious, smart one, and you still move the project forward. Now, of course, this isn't about being fake or manipulative just for the sake of it. It's about realizing that human psychology is messy and trying to bulldoze people with logic is lazy and ineffective. Machiavelli doesn't say be evil. He says, understand how people really work and operate within that reality. So far, we've covered don't accept invitations to fight. Ask questions instead of defending, agree with feelings. Redirect the story, protect their dignity while guiding their decision. Let's go deeper and make this even more concrete with a full scenario. Picture this. You're in a team meeting. You've spent weeks working on a project plan. You present it. Halfway through, someone interrupts. Honestly, I think this is overcomplicated. We should just stick with what we've been doing. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The room shifts. People look at you. This is a critical moment. Most people do one of two things. They go submissive. Okay, maybe you're right. We can just, or they go aggressive. Well, what we've been doing doesn't work. Clearly, that's why we're here. Both options pull you straight into argument territory. Instead, you use the Machiavellian trick. You smile slightly, stay relaxed and say, I get that simplicity is usually better. Let me ask you, in your view, what's the main downside of sticking to the current approach? Now they have to talk specifics, not just throw shade. They say, we'll avoid confusing clients, we won't have to retrain people, and we won't blow the budget. You nod, so stability, clarity, and cost all valid. That's exactly why I built this version the way I did. Can I show you the part that protects those three? There's no argument. You just made them feel heard. You translated their objection into criteria. You claim to already respect. And now you're guiding the room's attention to the part of your plan that aligns with those criteria. Even if they still resist, you frame the conversation around your structure instead of their emotional jab. This is another core Machiavellian idea. Frame the terms of the discussion. If you control the frame, you don't need to argue. You just keep moving within your own structure. And people either step into it or obviously step outside of it. Let's move into personal life again, but this time something heavier. Say you have a family member who always criticizes your life choices, your career, your relationship, your parenting, and you feel that familiar heat rising every time they start one of their speeches. The easy path is to get defensive or avoid them completely. But sometimes you can't avoid them. So, what do? First, you predecide your battlefield. You tell yourself, I'm not here to convince them. I'm here to protect my peace and make sure they don't influence people around us against me. That's your objective. When they say, I still don't understand why you quit that stable job, it was such a mistake, instead of arguing about stable job versus new path, you calmly say, I get that it doesn't look like a wise decision from the outside. You've always valued stability. I value music, growth, and challenge more. We're just operating from different priorities. You separated perspectives instead of arguing over facts. If they push, well, you'll regret it. You respond, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But it's a decision I'm willing to live with. You're not fighting. You're not trying to win. You're drawing a boundary with no drama. That's power. It's not showy, but it's there. Sometimes Machiavellian wisdom is not about twisting music others. It's about being untwistable. Now, let's talk about a more subtle tactic, letting people think it was their idea. Machiavelli would tell rulers to plant ideas slowly indirectly so that when people finally came around, they defend those ideas like their own children. You can do the same in everyday life. Let's say you want your team to adopt a new tool. You know, if you come in and say, we're switching to this, it's better. Here's why. You'll face resistance. People hate change even if the change is obviously better. So instead, a few weeks earlier, you start asking around, what do you hate most about our current system? If you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about how we work, what would it be? How much time do you think we're losing every week because of X? You listen, you let them complain, you note their pain points. Later, when you introduce the new tool, you say, a bunch of you mentioned that we're losing time because of A and B, and the reporting is always messy. I found something that might solve exactly those issues. Can we test it with a small group? It feels like an answer to their problem, not your bright idea. They laid out the problem. You just connected music, the dots. You don't need to argue. The problem itself does the convincing, the core lesson here. When you want to move people, make the movement feel like an answer to their own complaints, values, or desires, not a correction to their beliefs. By the way, let's address something directly. Is this manipulative? It can be, sure, in the wrong hands. Anything powerful can. But the reality is people already do this unconsciously all the time. Ads, politics, social media, even family dynamics. Everyone is using some version of these tactics. The difference is whether you're blindly reacting to it or consciously steering your life in the middle of it. You can use this to win petty fights, or you can use it to keep your sanity, improve your relationships, and stop bleeding energy into arguments that never really change anything. Let's move into rapid fire. Practical tactics you can start using immediately. Tactic 1, the temperature check. When a conversation starts to feel heated, instead of pushing your point harder, you name the tension. It feels like this is getting a bit tense. I don't want us to turn this into a fight. Let's figure out what we're actually trying to solve here. Most people have never heard someone say that calmly. It breaks the spell. You're not surrendering. You're changing the game from me versus you to us versus problem. Tactic 2, the time delay. Machiavelli would tell rulers never to make decisions in the heat of emotion. Same goes for you when someone tries to drag you into an argument by time. You know what? I don't want to answer that off the cuff. Let me think about it and come back to you. You don't owe anyone an instant reaction. And in that space, your emotions cool, your brain turns back on, and you can choose your response instead of reacting. Tactic 3, the written channel. In the modern world, one way to never argue is to move conflict into a medium where emotions are lower. If a situation at work is getting emotionally loaded in verbal conversations, suggest summarizing in writing. Let me write out how I'm seeing this and send it to you, and you can add your perspective. Written words slow people down. They have to think. They can't shout or interrupt. It's not perfect, but it gives you more control. Tactic 4, the third-party frame. When you're stuck in a clash of opinions, instead of going back and forth as me as you, introduce music, an external standard. At the end of the day, our customer doesn't care which one of us is right. They care about tenth. So, which option serves that better? Given the company's goal this quarter is Y, which approach gets us closer? You're removing your ego and theirs from the center and pointing at something larger. It's hard to argue against a shared objective without revealing your pettiness. Tactic 5. Silence. Most people are terrified of silence. They fill it with justifications, excuses, extra arguments. But if you can learn to sit in a moment of silence without fidgeting, you become very powerful in conversation. When someone says something provocative, sometimes the best response is a calm look and a pause. Often they'll backpedal, soften, or explain themselves better without you saying a word. Sometimes the absence of argument is more unsettling and effective than any clever comeback. Now, there's one more angle we need to cover, or this would all be incomplete. When to walk away on purpose. Machiavelli would say, if a situation gives you all the signs that you cannot control it, you don't stay and fight harder. You withdraw. You reposition. You come back later on. Better terms. Or you don't come back at all. There are some people you will never convince. Not because your arguments aren't good, but because their identity is fused with being against you or against what you represent. A parent stuck in a certain mindset. A colleague who sees you as a rival. An online stranger who gets a dopamine hit every time they disagree. Trying to win those people is like trying to teach a wall to understand you. The wall is not the problem. Your choice to keep talking to the wall is. So, one of the most Machiavellian power-preserving things you can do is to quietly label some people in your mind as no-argue zones. I don't explain my life to this person. I don't defend myself to this person. I don't debate ideas with this person. You stay polite, you stay calm, but you don't offer your energy. You let them talk. You nod once in a while. You change the subject or you excuse yourself. That's not weakness. That's choosing where your influence actually has a chance to matter. Let's bring this together in a simple mental model you can carry with you. Before you get pulled into an argument, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What outcome do I actually want here? Not being right. What do I want to happen? 2. What does this person really want? Safety, status, music control, respect to be heard. 3. How can I move us closer to my outcome while letting them keep what they care about? Once you see those answers, you almost never need to argue. You just pick tactics that align with both. If your outcome is keep the relationship intact, you'll speak differently than if your outcome is get this decision approved. If what they want is to feel respected, you'll use more validation and less correction. If they want control, you'll offer them limited choices instead of giving them commands. For example, let's say you want your partner to go to therapy with you, but they're resistant. If your goal is to win an argument, you'll start with, you need therapy. You always blow up over small things. This is unhealthy. Technically, you might have a point, but now you're the enemy. If your goal is the outcome, you might say, I feel like we're repeating the same conflicts, and I hate seeing both of us hurt. I've decided I'm going to talk to someone and work on my side. I'd love it if we did a few sessions together too. Not because you're the problem, but because I want us to have tools we don't currently have. Would you be open to trying 3 sessions and then deciding if it's worth continuing? No argument, just an invitation. They get to keep dignity. You still move closer to what you want. If they say no, you don't argue. You say, okay, I understand. I'm still going to go because I want to show up better in this relationship. If you ever change your mind, I'd love to have you there with me. You don't fight them into changing. You become harder to fight against by leveling yourself up. That's something most people miss. The more stable and centered you become, the less people actually want to argue with you. Arguments feed off volatility. When you're calm, grounded, and clear on your boundaries, it's like trying to start a fire on wet stone. So, the long-term version of Machiavelli's trick is this. Build yourself into the kind of person who rarely gets hooked. Short-term tactics are great. Questions instead of defenses. Validation instead of attack. Framing instead of reacting. All of that will help you right away. But the deeper work is noticing your own patterns. When do you most get drawn into arguments? Is it when you feel disrespected? When you feel misunderstood? When someone questions your competence? If you can spot that pattern, you can pre-plan your response. Next time someone questions your competence in front of others, and your stomach tightens and your chest heats up, you can say in your head, this is the part where I usually over-explain and argue. Instead, I'm going to ask one clarifying question and keep my voice low. Little by little, you stop being dragged around by your triggers. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but the same principles apply to regular people trying to navigate offices, families, and group chats. He cared about one thing, effectiveness, and he saw that the people who spent their time arguing about how things should be got eaten alive by those who quietly dealt with things as they are. Reality check. Most of the arguments you've had in your life didn't change much, did they? But they did cost you something. Time, energy, sleep, connection, reputation. Imagine how your life shifts if from this point on you start treating arguments like a bad investment. Every time you feel that, pull, prove yourself, clap back, correct them. You pause and ask, is there a smarter way to get what I want here? Sometimes the answer will be to speak up firmly and clearly. Sometimes the answer will be to stay silent, or ask a question, or tell a story, or simply walk away. But almost never will the answer be raise your voice, attack their character, bury them in facts, and hope they magically appreciate you afterward. Never argue with anyone, not in the way most people mean argue. Don't wrestle in the mud for the satisfaction of being music right. Aim higher, shift the frame, protect your power, guide the outcome. Let other people keep their dignity. And quietly over time you'll notice something strange. People listen more, resist less, and somehow without you winning anything out loud, life starts bending more and more in your favor. That's Machiavelli's trick.